I actually have to say I've never thought about building my career, because I knew when I was 6 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. And I always said, if I can make a living out of doing or playing drums or making music, then I'm happy. Even if it was teaching, or it was playing in a band, or it was playing in cover bands, or just maybe just like engineering records or producing records, I was happy. And the amount of money you make, it didn't interest me at all. I was just like, I want to do music. I want to do that's the only goal I had. And I think in music, there's no way you can point out your career. The best thing is that you have to be as good as possible so people can talk about you to other people. And this is mouth to mouth advertising is still the best advertising you can get, because it's not only, and I think this is very, very important. Something I actually learned is that 50% of your career is about playing, and the other 50% of your career is probably by the person you are. Because as a musician, you need to feel each other. Feel, and has a lot to do with that. Not so much by pointing out your career and hoping. It's not like in companies that you can become the managing director of a band. So what do I mean by the 50% of playing? Is that maybe you could be like the best drummer you've ever seen, or you could be the most technical drummer in the world, and you could blow everybody away with your skills. But you're like, and the other 50% is like, you know that you are not easy to work with. What do you think people would do? People would probably choose the one who might be not as good as you, but has a really nice personality, because he's easygoing and he's nice to have around. So that's something that everyone needs to know. I mean, you have to be a good musician, as good as you can, but please don't be an arse. What I discovered is that being an artist myself and being on big festivals as a headliner or as a support act, the only thing I would advise or would try to do is like, be yourself and don't think that you're the biggest stars in the world. What I discovered from really famous artists that I met and I had a good chance to talk with is that they were so easygoing. They were so nice, and they weren't busy with how famous they were. They were busy with just being themselves. And I think that's something you need to remind as well. It's like, it doesn't matter what kind of spot on the bill or which place in the charts you are. It's all about music. We're all here to do the same thing. One important same thing is that because of the love of music, we want to do this. And we love this. So put your egos aside and just do your thing and be friendly and be nice, I think. For me, being a professional, I'm always really good prepared on everything I try to do. But sometimes, it's different. And especially in music, you might be so good prepared on doing stuff, and then by the end of it, you're getting into a session and it's totally changing. So you're prepared for nothing. So it's what's being professional. I think being professional for me means being prepared, but the same thing is like, hopefully I have everything organized really good enough to work with and to be easygoing. But again, you never know what's happening, and you never know how records turn out, or gigs turn out, or tours, or so try to be as good as possible. That's the only thing I can advise. When I got back from New York, Dom gave me a schedule for practicing. And this schedule was pretty tough. He had a schedule, and it made like 6.5 hours a day practicing, only practicing. Not only practicing on the drums, but practicing on the practice pad. And I at that time, I was actually teaching a lot. So I would get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, start practicing. And by 2 afternoon, I would do and teach all day till 10 o'clock at night, which is a practice too, because you need to teach other people how to play and everything. So it mainly I was playing drums all day long. By the time, like a year later, or a year and a half later, I was finding out like, okay, I'm practicing a lot, but you know what? I want to explore more in music. And I gave up a little bit on practicing. And these days, because of the things I'm doing, it's difficult for me to practice, especially 6 hours a day. But I have to say, when I'm on tour, I'll make sure before the gig starts, I have 1 hour where I can sit down with my practice pad, and maybe Paul is putting some music on in the dressing room, Ruben is playing along with some guitar riffs or whatever, but I'll be listening to the music and use the music as a sort of a metronome. So I'm doing all technique stuff like doubles, paradiddles, or even the free stroke or the Muller technique, and all these techniques, but getting into a zone. It's more like getting into a zone than basically practicing the exercises. So that's what I'm doing before a gig, or before a recording session, or before every rehearsal we do. I'll try to kind of like find a way of a half an hour before, so I can warm up. It's more like a warm up thing. my advice to everyone is that if you have time and if you want to learn, you should practice. And obviously everyone is saying you need to practice, but how to practice is maybe more important. And that's something I discovered later when you have less time, you need to schedule everything, which helps you, because otherwise you're stressing because you want to learn a lot. So what's the good thing? Make a schedule and maybe doing exercise for every 10 minutes, like doing your technique for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then go to play some from out of a book, something that you want to learn. If it's sambas or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just do it like 15 minutes again. And if you have the time you have, like if you have an hour a day, schedule it in for an hour and do this for a long time. Don't do this like, oh, I do this exercise, this page once, and I'll go further. No, maybe stay at the page for 1 week and then change it. And I think that's the best practice you can do, because it stays in your head instead of not just fluently, it goes away. So it stays there. You need to concentrate. It's a little bit of a discipline that's there. I like the title, The Man versus the Artist. I think it should be a title for a song. It's very open, I think. But in a way, in my case, I think it's the same. Being the man or being the artist. Because on one hand, I'm playing with trigger finger and I'm an artist. Being on stage, everyone is looking at you and you'll be like having this, your stage ego there and everyone is looking at you. And at the same time, you'll be at home and you'll be like, just like cooking. And you're the man in the house, something like that. But behind that stage presence and behind that one, it's still the same man who's there. And you might be seeing us or me before a gig, and I'll be like very quietly warming up, making jokes with everyone, talking to everyone, and go on stage and be like, wow, which is quite funny because it's people who think, a lot of times people think, even with me seeing playing, it's like, what do you take? What kind of drugs do you take? Nothing. Never did. Never done it. The only thing I do is after a gig, drink a nice wine. But it's still the same. After that, take my clothes and I go back in the van, next to the next gig. So I think man versus artist, it's open and it might be different from some other people, but for me, it's equal. Something to think about. I like it. I always found it really difficult, this business, especially to understand, because you have so many, like, I call it ingredients in there, and you need to discover what all these ingredients are that makes it all work together. Going from, okay, you have the music that works and you know how to make music, but then as the other part in being a musician, and it's the business side of it, going from contracts to publishing to finding a booker. What are these different, what are these people doing? What is the exact thing they're doing? And the other thing is that it's constantly evolving and changing, and especially in this new era with internet and streaming and everything, it's totally changing. Like if I go back like 5-10 years ago, I would exactly know you never release a single then or whatever. But these days it's all open in the world. So we all need to adjust to the new method of not method, but the whole ability that's there on the internet. But to understand, and that still is to understand like publishing, or to understand what it is publishing. I mean, it took me years to understand, and still now sometimes I have to think, wow, what is this? So it's quite difficult. It's difficult to understand. But if you're really into it, and I know a lot of musicians I know aren't into it because it takes too much time from anything else you need to do. So that's why we have managers we try to trust, or trust. Up to you, of course. I'll trust mine, so that's good. And make sure you make, and good advice for it, I think, is if you're at that point where you talk to record labels, managers, bookers, I think the best advice is to find a good lawyer who's really knowing the things that they're talking about. I know it's difficult because it sounds really tough, a lawyer, I know, but I think everyone you talk to who is in a band professionally making records, doing this for a long time, are doing it. And don't be afraid of it. You can go there and just ask for advice, and they explain it to you, because it's a lot to talk about. You as an artist or band need to be happy. And it's the same thing with making music. I think you need to be able to make the music you want to make. And okay, there are people like producers or whatever who can change it, or might have influences like maybe we should try this or try that. Same with record companies. They might have good ideas and you should listen to them. But at the end of the day, before you sign anything in this business, please take a lawyer and make sure it's good enough for you. You'll be there at the gig and playing and all into the gig, playing really into the set, enjoying the people shouting at you. But before you go on stage, there's a lot of times you're like really like not nervous, but there's like tension going on, and you want to go like, oh man, this needs to be good. Yeah. And you go on stage, and I used to go and still do a trigger finger gig. I go on stage and stand on my drum stool. And I was getting up on stage, and I was almost there to stand up, and I put my foot on my chair, and you think the chair was falling down. No. But I turned and all of a sudden I hear that my pens are just like ripping out of each other. Like, and I'm like, oh my God. So what do? As a drummer, it's easy. You could sit down and pretend nothing happens. But what I do, I turned myself around and showed everyone what happened. Show business.